Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of SecuriTEA and Crumpets, where we host security professionals each month to talk about different security topics. Seeing this is SecuriTEA, I'm drinking a nice breakfast tea to start my day. If it's morning where you are, I hope you'll join me for your early morning caffeine intake, or maybe something stronger elsewhere. I'm delighted to introduce my third guest, PwnFunction. PwnFunction is an independent security consultant. He is a content creator where he creates easy to digest YouTube videos on security topics and web security challenges on his website. He's building an interactive security platform, Hackercamp.co. PwnFunction, welcome to the stream.
How's it going?
It's going really good, man. Good to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. I obviously had some potential issues with the stream this morning, but we fixed that.
Yeah.
So initially we met when we did the Vue.js research initially with Gareth Hayes. And
Right.
obviously we've there's been quite a few podcasts that we've been on together that are around that. So
Yeah.
so for this stream I kind of want to do things a little bit different and actually get to know PwnFunction. Um, is that cool with you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So where did the name PwnFunction come from?
I believe I was looking for a good name, and I couldn't find any because all of them were taken either on Twitter or GitHub, YouTube. I would usually miss one or the other place. So what I did was I pulled up a sheet or an Excel sheet and had a bunch of hacking related words on one column. And on another column, I did some programming related words like function and condition, loops, subroutine, things like that. And kind of did a small little permutation thing. And I finally came up with pwn function.
That's actually really interesting. I mean, obviously, mine is not as unique. So, when I used to play video games when I was younger, I didn't really have that much of an imagination. So, I used to just look around the room for things like that I could use. So, like at one point, my name Lewis was taken. So, I was like, screw this. So, I just looked around and saw like I had Slazenger. So, I was like, okay, well, Slazenger is my druid name, for example, in World of Warcraft. That's no longer the case. I now take it from, uh, popular Netflix series like Carol Baskin. So I guess things haven't really changed too much, but that's really interesting that that's how PwnFunction came to be. Uh, I just thought like maybe you were like looking at JavaScript a lot and you were like, I'm just going to pwn these functions.
Nah.
So it's quite
Yeah.
interesting that it actually was an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so how did you actually get into security? So how did you navigate towards this field?
Hmm. It was I guess 2008, 2009 ish. That's where the spark happened. I watched the movie Die Hard 4. Had a lot of hacking, and I was like very interested in it, but I didn't know where to start. So I started to look for hacking tutorials online. Back in the day, it was all, like none of them were uh, quote unquote real, or they were practical. They were all fakes. And I was kind of disappointed. So I started to look more into it. But all I could find was some terminal tricks and command prompt and things like that. I started to learn as much as possible. It may not be hacking at the beginning, but I realized this could help me at some point. And then learned some programming. And did some game dev later on. Then I started to look back into security, and then I realized there's a bunch of tools like Nmap and whatever. Uh, so I wanted to understand them a little bit. So I started to clone them, and I obviously I wasn't successful. It's too big of an open source project, but either way, it did give me some experience, I guess. And over time, I believe like almost 2.5 years ago, I started looking into web security. So that's when it kind of like truly started. But up until then, it was just groundwork, I guess.
That's interesting. So I guess you just didn't dive straight into security. It was more of a, you had a fascination around a lot of different things of technology, and then
Yeah,
I guess kind of navigated towards web security.
yeah. Now it's low level.
We'll definitely talk about that soon. But I want to get more of a understanding from so we were on the OWASP Portland podcast,
Yeah,
and so that's where we talked about the Vue.js research, and I don't there's been tons of times where we talked about that, so I don't really want to cover that today. But you mentioned on the OWASP Portland podcast a while back that you didn't have a traditional academic route when going into security. So obviously it sounds more around the fascination around like computer gaming and like game development and development. But like, what did that path look like for you? Did you just decide not to go down the academic route, or yeah, how did that look?
yeah. I think I decided quite later on down the road that I didn't want to continue doing university. It was like a year and a half into it. Then I kind of like dropped out. Uh, the syllabus here, or basically where I was learning, it wasn't that great. It was, yeah, I would say it wasn't that great. So I realized I wouldn't want to spend like 3 more years looking into it. So I realized a better approach would be improving my skills instead of actually going down the road of getting a degree. So, so yeah, I kind of dropped out midway through. But until then, like learning university and the high school and everything, they did help me get into programming and things like that. Found some friends, so yeah, um,
That's
that's the thing, I
interesting.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So obviously, I guess not that many people know that I attempted to do a PhD a while a while
Oh.
back. Yeah, and I had a similar route to that, right? So I did my 4 year degree. I did a placement year where I did programming and stuff. So I did get some good experience through university. But when I went to do the PhD, I didn't do a master's or anything. In the UK, you can directly go into a PhD, so you don't have to like do the master's route. And yeah, so I just got to the point where I was sitting there like, this isn't really, I don't want to be a teacher, I don't think. So, this isn't really going to help me.
Mm,
So yeah, it was more like, I moved into consulting after that, more off to the fact because I just felt like it would be more beneficial in the long term or even in the short term, to be honest. Having a PhD would have been fantastic for, bragging rights, but I don't think it would have been like a career changing opportunity for me at the time.
yeah,
Um, okay, so
yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about. So speaking of consulting, you work as a independent consultant. So I guess you work for various different, potentially small to large businesses, maybe outside, inside, different types of work. So tell me, what do you generally do when you work for these companies?
Right. Uh, just a small correction. It's just a company,
Oh,
right? So just a single one. I kind of got lucky with it, and it's been going on ever since. So I kind of like started out sending some reports to the company, like randomly, and apparently they appreciated it. They were a startup back in the day, but now they're actually big and they're a private program, so I can't really talk about them. Um, but yeah, so I kind of got lucky. I sent some bug reports. They were interested. They didn't have a bug bounty program back then, but yeah. And then I eventually uh, talked to them, and they flew me over. Got We talked a little bit more and came to a conclusion that we could do some sort of a contract, and that's what we did. So since ever since I believe it's been like 3 years or so, I've been working for the single company as an independent consultant. The rest of the time just goes into like learning or making videos and things like that. So
I got it. That's
Yeah.
actually really cool. Like I didn't. So when I first read your title, I just sort of thought that you were doing like private consulting for companies, but that's a really unique way of getting into into a company's portfolio, I guess. How um, so how did that look like from the beginning? Like, you started reporting some bugs. Did they have any kind of pushback towards it? Because you said they're a private program now. Obviously, we're not going to talk about who they are. But you know, that's really interesting. Like, because in the past when I used to report vulnerabilities to companies that didn't have like a bug bounty program or a private program or any type of like bug bounty itself, they would always be kind of some most of the time just hesitant or more aggressive in their responses.
Mhm.
So I just kind of tended not to do it. And like if I found a bug, I was like, what do I do with this? So yeah, how did that look for you? Like at the beginning of that, which obviously transitioned into something great. Working with the company for 3 years. More of an internal kind of advisor, which is very cool.
Right. Yeah. Initially, when I sent out some reports, it was just a single report. They liked it and they emailed me back. The next day, they said, "Pretty cool. Thanks for doing this." They wanted to know more about me, asked a bunch of questions. So I told them, and since they were, like kind of appreciative of the reports, so I spent a couple more hours digging through and sent them a couple more reports, and then eventually they were like, "Okay, we need to talk. We'll call you tomorrow," and things like that. And we hopped on a call, and they were thinking of hiring me as an employee, but they were far away, so I didn't want to move. Um, so yeah, eventually we settled. They said, "You know what? We're gonna talk about this face to face. Why don't you fly here?" And that's what we did. And I went there, and we had some small chat. Met everyone. It was kind of cool. It's also kind of cool that the company right now is pretty big, and it's an interesting journey. Yeah.
So obviously, I know we can't probably talk, about specifics, but what type of bugs were you finding at the beginning, and what type of issues are you finding now? Is it still the same, or is it, more kind of like business logic type issues because you have more of a foothold in the company, like now, or is it more just still finding cross-site scripting, still finding XYZ?
Yeah, these days it's been more of business logic, I would say. But initially, the first report was a simple CSRF, but it was on JSON. So I had to use the 307 redirect flash thing back in the day. I'm not sure if it works now, but yeah. Uh, uh, I that was the first kind of the report, and the following reports were related to GraphQL. And these days, it's just I don't come across quite often the XSS on the program anymore, but it's more of business logic. Yeah, like you said, after getting a deeper understanding of it. So yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Now let's talk about some CTF stuff. So I think that you had a CTF challenge on your YouTube series. I could be wrong. Do you still dabble in CTFs these days? Have CTFs, helped you kind of improve your skill set? Like how has that kind of looked for you?
Hell yeah. CTFs are my bay. They're pretty great. I would say for anyone. I guess they're good CTFs and bad CTFs. Obviously, some of them are like super guessy and stuff. I would recommend not play them or stay away from them. But at least like the good ones, they usually have like good research behind every single challenge, and you get to learn some good tricks and you know, essentially you at the end of the day, you're gonna get some new ideas that you didn't really get before. And also, there's a bug already, so you're gonna sit there and train your perseverance. So yeah, but CTFs have quite helped me quite a lot, I would say. Um, I would say I don't do much of bug bounties, but I would do a lot of CTFs. That kind of a play. Yeah.
Got it. And do you normally work with a team, or do you primarily do CTFs solo?
I used to, but then I met some good people, and now we have a team. It's CXP.
CXP, interesting. And what is your favorite CTF to if like a yearly CTF that comes around, like what's your favorite one?
Google's pretty good. Yeah, Google, and I believe um wait, what else is there? I can't really remember, but Google's pretty good. I play them every single year. Yeah.
So is this the one that's actually happening on like soon on the 17th? Which is or or is this just saying that that's what today is? Oh no,
Uh,
that's just saying the date, never mind. Like well, I wonder when the CTF is. Or
yeah.
maybe you can just join it at any time, I guess. I just
I'm not
opened it
really
real quick.
sure.
I just opened it real quick and it's saying the time. So yeah, that was silly of me to even say, but that's interesting. But yeah, CTF with Google, is that the correct website to go to? Do you know? Capture the flag dot with Google.
Yeah, that's the one. But I'm not sure if it's coming anytime soon. Is it?
Yeah, maybe I just got discombobulated by opening it real quick. I haven't seen it. So for me, like I've attempted to do CTFs in the past, and I generally only really do them when I go to conferences. So I used to go to like B-side San Francisco, etc. And like then and like B-sides London, and I would do the CTFs at the conferences, and then you could take the VMs home sometimes too, and work on them. But yeah, so it does sound like it's, obviously because you get to experience new types of vulnerabilities, like from a bug bounty perspective, the way I see it, like people tend to kind of just navigate to the same types of vulnerabilities all the time. So I just always trying to knock out cross-site scripting or looking for CSRF, etc. Whereas with a CTF, every time a new challenge comes around, it's down to like, you have to maybe like pick up some network skills or work with people that have network skills, and then navigate towards different types of like issues. There might be like some server-side request forgery or cross-site scripting, etc. But it does require you to not always just look for the same type of systemic issue that you generally look for.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go and talk about your YouTube channel. So your I'll put it on the screen in a second, but your YouTube channel has an impressive 27,000 subscriptions these days. Like that's um, very impressive, actually. What made you start making YouTube videos?
It was, I believe, a combination of learning by teaching process or methodology, uh, plus um, live overflows inspiration. Yeah. Um, so I kind of realized that you could learn a lot more if you could, like, teach the same thing to someone else. Then you should basically go out your way and try to understand the concept a little bit more. uh, so yeah, I do that for one reason, and also sharing knowledge to the community. It's a cool thing. That's probably the comments and everything. That's the main driver. I should. That's the yeah. That's the one. Also, I used to watch Live Overflow from the very beginning, like from 400 subscribers or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, he's been a great inspiration as well. So I guess you put those two things together and you can start something.
Yeah, I remember viewing some of like your YouTube series and also live overflows, and just being super impressed by the the artwork and the drawings. And even though like a lot of them are kind of like kind of they look scruffy, but they're like intended to like look also very professional.
Yeah.
I like that kind of vibe when it comes to those two types of channels. Now, my next question is: so I guess some people who have seen your YouTube series may like kind of wonder how you normally make your videos. So like, you have some really popular ones. I think the Sea Surf one has a huge amount of 94,000 views on your Sea Surf.
Is it?
Yeah, 94,000 views, dude. And it's a year ago. In 1 year, you've nearly achieved like 100,000 views. absolutely
Oh
massive.
wow. Okay.
So I would
Oh,
just be in.
XSS is also catching up, I guess.
I mean, XSS is such a a loved topic by many, and I think it's just because it's such an easy entry barrier. You just start throwing in some scripts or like event handlers, and eventually something pops up, and people just get blown away by that mentality.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, how do you normally make, like, for example, like the CSurf video or the XXE video? Like, how does it go from like an idea to kind of maybe a script into like actual production? Like, what is that timeline? How does that look?
Right. It's also the most asked question on my Twitter DMs and YouTube comments. uh, yeah. So basically, what I do is I come up with ideas first off, and then write a script. I use Google Docs to write scripts, and then I start recording. I record the audio first. It could be sometimes I use Audacity, sometimes I use Adobe Auditions, but mostly I use Audacity. Yeah, and then after sort of like the audio is recorded, I edit them, and then after that, I go about drawing. And when I use the program called Adobe Animate CC, so I draw at the same time I record using Camtasia as a screen recorder. So as I draw, I record them. It kind of gives you like a drawing kind of animation effect or whatever. And then I I remove the cursor because it's still going to be in there in the actual screen recording. I have to remove that. Then it actually looks like something. Um, yeah, and then for editing, I use Camtasia Studio and the Adobe Premiere Pro. So yeah, that's sort of my workflow. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. The one thing that I've seen, I've been watching like a bunch of other people do YouTube videos, and I think a lot of people don't like. I think they're so. I think a lot of people just tend to stop if the video doesn't look good, and I got to the point where I started to try and create content as well, and started to use like obviously I was also in your DMs asking you questions about these things, so that's why I wanted to make sure like the wider audience knew about like those types of tips and tricks. And I think doing the recording of obviously it doesn't work for everyone, but like creating a script beforehand definitely allows you to then kind of navigate the screen easier, because you can do transitional pieces, I feel, which is pretty
Yeah.
pretty important. But I've seen like a few YouTube videos that like are using like PowerPoint, and probably like what I'm using right now for this stream, like OBS, to like record their stream, or record their like desktop with the obviously their camera, and also then probably just showing their like background, sorry, their desktop too. So like some try to do like a full production, some try to do like more of a just ship it type of thing, because some people are doing like a combination of live streaming and also post production type stuff.
Right.
So I think there's like no from what I've seen, at least, I've obviously dabbled in all of them. I think there's like no easy answer. I think if you want to make a good video that's going to be like beautifully accepted, going into like animate, etc. I even brought one of those scratch pads kind of thing to be able to try and improve my drawings. But yeah, so I think like you can still do it with PowerPoint, and even if you really wanted to, like Microsoft Word, sorry, not sorry, Paint, Microsoft Paint. So
Paint, yeah.
technically you could do that. So it's
I'll
not.
I'll do I'll do a video in MS Paint just for the meme.
I think you
One
definitely
video.
should. Yeah, so I was just trying to, because obviously like it can be quite, and obviously like Adobe products aren't the cheapest thing. The cloud is pretty expensive. So you mentioned Camtasia. There are other like free alternatives that people could use if they wanted to dabble in the things. And until you could afford that, maybe you could just do like PowerPoint things, or XYZ. I think that's probably be a good um, way to navigate into that space.
Yeah. Whenever you're starting out, keep it simple. It's gonna get really overwhelming.
Oh,
pretty soon.
100%. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like a lot of people
Yeah, yeah,
keep like trying to make it. So like, you could just draw the letters. So like you could, like, for example, I just did my OWASP video and I just replayed, like I made OWASP once, and then I just
yeah. It
replayed
was
it
pretty good.
throughout the video. So like, I didn't have to keep drawing those things. It was just, do it once and reuse. And you could do that for the entire alphabet technically. You could just build like a library of your own style of drawing and, you know,
Yeah,
just replay it through all of your videos. So
yeah.
it's definitely one thing. So my question to you is like, what is your favorite video that you've created for your series?
Honestly, I don't have one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have one. Yeah.
So I actually quite enjoyed, your XXE one recently. That was pretty nice.
Ah,
Just from a visual representation, it was, and like even the static kind of, logo loading is a beautiful aesthetic to me. But I quite enjoyed that one. But obviously, I think your entire hacking series is pretty great. Like the next question is like you've been navigating towards like lower level stuff now, like more OS based things. So what
right.
made you make that change from the web series?
I'd still keep the web series, but lately it's just my brain craving for low level. I don't know why. Maybe I saw a bunch of videos from uh, on Awesome Kling. Yeah, do you know him? He's developing Serenity OS, and he puts out these
Mm-hmm.
hour-long videos and how he actually goes about writing code, and he talks about a lot of OS systems programming and things like that. So yeah, I've been lately into it.
I think he also
So
streams that on Twitch as well, actually. I could be
oh,
wrong, but I feel like he might, which is very interesting. So yeah, I guess like obviously getting inspiration from other people is very, a good driver for many people. Like a lot of the work that I've done is normally based off what other people are doing, or like trying to improve that problem space, or just getting inspiration of like, hang on, you could do things a bit differently, which I guess maybe where the Vue.js stuff came from too.
yeah,
So let's move over to your current initiative. So you're working on hackercamp.co. Can you give
oh yeah.
the audience a quick summary of what is Hackercamp?
It's an attempt at creating a platform for learning cybersecurity interactively. It sort of like contains courses, but these course modules are sort of like interactive and it's full of tasks that you need to complete and things like that. Um, the uh, the idea is kind of like learning cybersecurity, just not by watching videos, because oftentimes if you just watch the videos, you feel you understand it. Of course you do, but it doesn't stick in your head for a lot longer unless you kind of like put it into practice. So I believe that doing it in a practical way is a lot more efficient. Um, so I'm trying to solve that problem. There are a bunch of platforms out there already doing it, but I want to bring something new, make it a lot more easier, a lot more, interactiveness, I believe. And the idea is to create a platform where people can learn without leaving the browser. Hopefully, too ambitious, but it's a start, and it's still in beta. I'm still building it. Hopefully, it should be out in like a month or two. And the idea is, I for beta users, I plan to get the user feedback and then improve and then iterate. So that's the idea for the next couple of months. Yeah.
And obviously, is there going to be any type of like free model that people might be able to use, like a couple of like exercises that, or is it going to be a paid service, or is it going to be like some free, some paid? Like, have you figured that out yet, or is that still like in the back of your
Yeah,
mind?
that's still under yeah, the pricing is the hardest part. I wanna keep it affordable, obviously, but yeah, pricing can get hard. I haven't really thought about how I'm gonna structure the whole thing. But it's most of, like challenges and stuff like that. They're all going to be free. Only probably like some courses are going to be paid, but other than that, almost everything should be free, like the challenges and the tasks and stuff like that.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is that everyone who's listening should go to hackercamp.co and sign up to be a beta tester so they can get some like one, the first fresh look of what it looks like, and two, get in, maybe learn something along the way.
Yeah, that would be cool.
So I think I have, I guess, two questions, and you may have answered the first one, but where did the inspiration of Hackercamp come from? Because obviously you mentioned there are things that already exist, but where did your inspiration for it come from?
Right. So it's just from personally exploring the process of learning. So usually, what would happen is, at least for me, whenever I start learning something new, I just keep going down the rabbit hole, like a dependency black hole kind of things, because I start at one thing, then I realize this requires some other knowledge, like prerequisite. Then I start looking into it, and then that requires something else, and I keep going inside a black hole that I never come back out. So yeah, that was kind of a problem. So I wanted to kind of solve that as well with this platform by giving them like insights and like a high level overview right when they need it. So yeah, it's still, I'm not really sure if the idea is perfect for everybody or not. It's still under testing and everything, but I believe that's where the inspiration comes from. And also, I've planned on creating a lot of challenges and practice tasks that I could do every single day to make myself better. So yeah, that's the thing.
Nice. And who would be the target audience? Would it be security professionals, or would it be developers? Would it, be anyone? Would it have different levels of, usability in that regard?
Um, it's not. I'm not sure if it's bound to anything yet. But to be specific, uh, pen testers, yeah, bug bounty guys, and also developers. So those are my three main target audience, I believe, because I'll be covering things from web to probably some low level to maybe something that's weird as not weird, but it's just not familiar with, like forensics and stuff like that. So yeah, mm, so it's targeting anyone that wants to kind of learn or jump into security and amp up their skills.
Nice. So, what are some of the unexpected technical challenges that you've faced, when building Hackercamp? So, like any of the technical side of things, from development to, just building in general.
Right. So hmm, I think the biggest problem for me right now, it's still under dev, but yeah, the problem would be creating isolated environments at scale for people. Like I'll be hosting challenges and stuff like that, and for probably pro users, they get their own isolated environment. So that part, I'm still kind of figuring it out. Um, I have to do it like preemptively on demand. I I, I thought maybe I could start off with Docker containers and then add in add add another layer of security with gvisor. It's sort of like a application kernel that sits between your actual kernel and your user land. Every syscall is going to go through it, so you can kind of filter out and stuff like that. So I thought I would use that in combination with Docker containers. But then I realized I couldn't really kind of make it, like on demand, or I haven't figured out how to do it yet. Thought about using Kubernetes and stuff like that, but then I realized, okay, there's too much stuff that I'm, uh, kind of exposing, like the Kubernetes internal API and stuff like that. So Then I moved into probably a better isolation would be VMs. Then I realized, okay, they take way too much time to load up. So how about micro VMs? Uh, and there was this good micro VM that's called Firecracker. AWS created it. That's what they use in AWS Lambda as well, I believe. But yeah, so I thought maybe I could use this to kind of like create on-demand isolated, like environment for people to run challenges and stuff like that. So yeah, it's still under construction. So yeah, that's probably the hardest one so far.
Wow. That sounds like you went through a lot of different iterations of like, hey, how can I do
Yeah,
this? What can I do next? Can I improve this? This is too slow. I don't like this. Like, what can I what can I do differently? That is Jesus Christ. Yeah, I could imagine that being very time consuming, but
yeah,
you have a lot of time, so
yeah.
interesting. Okay. So we just talked about technical challenges. But what about business challenges? So obviously this is a startup vibe. It's definitely being a startup. You're investing money into this type of stuff too, because you're going to have to play
Yeah.
around with AWS, compute services, potentially like promoting XYZ. So what are some of the types of business challenges for Hackercamp that you faced?
Um, for now, I don't think finance is a problem because usually startups, if you sign up for some services, they actually provide sort of like credits for startups. For example, AWS, they provide free credits, like I believe 5K worth of AWS credits if you're a startup. So I'm personally bootstrapping everything. So I don't have any plans to raising VCs or anything like that anytime soon. I just want to see where this goes and hopefully kind of like make some impact. But other than that, I want to be sort of like capital efficient in the sense that I need to kind of make the business profitable and also run it with its own profits. So yeah, but before anything else, I still need to validate the idea. I'm not really sure 100% if this works uh, at scale. Does everybody like it or not? So the only way to find that out is to put out the beta. So hopefully that's that. But business challenge, I believe pricing is hard and also bootstrapping can be hard. I don't know. We'll see.
Have you also struggled with the, you want to make it perfect aspect in this business too? Or is it more just like you're just trying to ship like an MVP and make it work for many people?
Yeah, it could be hard. So sometimes I just um, go into this mood that I want to make this look very good. But then I realized, dude, this is an MVP. You can't take too long. Uh, if you take too long, you're just wasting time. So what I'm trying to do is trying to have a balance between both of them. Kind of using whatever's available. I'm not doing anything from scratch. Like I'm not creating my own UI, sort of like a design system or whatever from the ground up. I'm not doing any of those. I'm using generally, whatever I could find out there that's pretty good, and then make some small tweaks, and then make it look a lot better. So yeah, that's essentially what I'm doing it for every single thing, like for UI or maybe a framework that I'm using. Cutting as much as possible in terms of developments and stuff like that. So I'm doing everything on AWS. Since I'm using a lot of managed services, it kind of uh, you know uh, keeps me in a better mood. So I don't have to go out and run these servers or patch these servers and things like that. All is taken care of. So yeah, I'm going serverless. Yeah.
Nice. And my last thing before we move on from Hacker Camp is, can you give any advice for someone who might be considering making a startup? I think you just gave one there, right? With the You're not trying to build things completely from scratch. You're using things like
Right.
AWS for management, etc. But if you were, going to give any type of advice for someone trying to, like, not do what you're doing, but in a similar domain of security, what could you offer, or just in general?
Right. So building an MVP is quite important. First off, you got to validate the idea. Yeah, you got to ship the product out, see how it works, and only then make small incremental improvements over time. And then it becomes sort of like a big product. Of course, this is my first venture as well. So I'm kind of new to this, learning at the same time. Not really in the position to give a lot of advice or anything, but also one common thing that I see from founders is that uh, wishful thinking. I'm guilty of it myself. Sometimes I um, fix the result and then, or the conclusion, and then find reasons to make it, seem right. But one should, understand that you shouldn't fool yourself at all. And yeah, wishful thinking is a big problem. So yeah, maybe be a bit more aware of decisions and metrics that's coming in and out. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point, because a lot of people don't like to call their own baby ugly, and they get this kind of,
Yep.
own justification around, well, I think it's a great idea, and like everyone else
Yeah.
thinks it's great. And then, but actually the results are like it's not very usable, or like maybe the UI is a bit broken, or, and it just kind of like pushes people away before they even get to see the product, right? So,
Yep.
but I think, just because you say you're new, I still think you have a lot to say around the matter. So you've done more than like myself in this domain. You've done more than quite a few people probably listening in this domain. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting to even hear from someone who has never, shipped something completely. It's still quite interesting to hear from. So let's move away from Hackercamp and move into web security, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this, and then see how things go. So
Yeah.
you know,
Cool.
we obviously both have a background in web security. And what would be your favorite web security bug?
Hmm. Okay. I don't think I've thought about it. Probably XSS, but I would say more on a meta side. But it's sort of like I may not have like a one favorite thing, but I like when people kind of like get creative and chain these weird states, different bugs together, and get the end result working. So that's more interesting to me. But I don't think I have, like the favorite one. But maybe I'm a little bit biased towards XSS. Yeah.
I mean, I would probably, if I was going to say like one of my favorite security bugs, it probably would be cross-site scripting. But I agree with you. Like, I like the kind of chained approach. So I think like something like in the JavaScript realm, like prototype pollution, is really interesting.
Mm.
And the paper from Oliver Arto, his last name is French. I may have absolutely boinked that, but he did a very cool kind of Ghost CMS remote code
Yeah, Ghost.
execution.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
where
that.
he found prototype pollution in Ghost CMS, which
Yeah, that was pretty
that
cool.
was a really cool kind of thing. So I think something like prototype pollution, or even like on the client side like DOM clobbering, like those types of vulnerabilities are quite fascinating, because they lead to like sometimes quite dangerous things, like
Yeah.
the LastPass vulnerability, which I believe Travis from Google found. I believe that was a combination of DOM clobbering and some types of vulnerabilities. And obviously there's the prototype pollution on the, obviously you can do prototype pollution on the client side, but obviously it's normally more damaging on the server side.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's stick into the web realm. And what do you find interesting about the browser and its security model? This might be a very high level and, what do you mean type question, but like, obviously the browser itself is a very unique mistress, and it has, a very interesting security model for different areas. What do you find interesting about the browser and its security model?
Hmm. All right. So, I guess I'm kind of interested in how I'm kind of interested in different parts. Like the JavaScript engine, or it could be how browsers act. Uh, do they go in compliant with the spec, things like that? Also, I'm kind of interested in same origin policy, how that's actually implemented under the hood, things like that. Uh, yeah, not
Yeah.
sure what else to answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things and like a lot of nuanced things that exist in the browser. And I think, like the rendering aspect has been like a really hot topic recently, with like
Oh,
mutation cross-site scripting,
yeah,
with the so that obviously there is the same origin policy, but there's also the same site policy, which introduces
right,
new interesting things, and that's really good for like like now.sh, or maybe if you're building up a bunch of containers, or like for your service on many like subdomains, for example, kind of like how Portswigger do it. You may want to put that in the same site policy because the same site policy basically like restricts about changing the top level domain, for example, and you don't want to compromise the TLD, the top level domain over the some of the subdomains that might not be in your control. It's like yeah. So I think like the rendering side of things is quite interesting. I wish I had enough expertise, which I'm trying to learn over time, to be able to like actually read that type of code. I know some of them are changing to Rust, which makes it even more kind of confusing, like Firefox, for example. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. Um, so let's move back into web. Cross-site scripting for a second. So you have created a bunch of cross-site scripting challenges. Now I had a question around this. Did you find these issues in live applications, or did you just get creative? Like, how did these challenges evolve and become what they are today? Because you have like easy challenges, harder challenges, etc. How did that look?
right. None of them are real. It's just something that I randomly did over a weekend. So mm, some of these challenges that I did, the warm ups are pretty kind of like very basic, um, and then a bunch of challenges that I actually did that were kind of like live for a week. So those were, I believe, I kind of like have some ideas on how to do it, and then maybe I take a shower, then I remember something else that I can add, and then I sleep, and then something else I remember, and then I note it down. Things like that happened, and then I like kind of sat down and created it. None of them are real. Just spoilers. None of them are real, but they're kind of fun. That's basically why I did it.
Yeah, I mean they obviously take a lot of things into context too. Like the first one, which I'm just looking at real quick. I unfortunately have not spent
Let
that
me
much
pull that.
not much time on this, but like spaghetti in a HTML, you're grabbing the search parameters, which is normally used in like newer newer applications because search params it wasn't around for a while, so it's assigning
Right.
it to inner HTML, which obviously is very interesting. So yeah, obviously you have like a lot of like interesting kind of approaches, here. I haven't obviously looked at this. And again, you're grabbing a value and then it's, throwing it into eval, and then it's also assigning to inner text. So you have, a template string with, interpolation for the value from user input, which is, pretty cool. So um, yeah, very interesting stuff. So I just wanted to know more around if like some of these things came from live apps that you found, or just around being creative. So um, let's move on a little bit. So I want to move on to like at least let's start with cross-site scripting in general.
Um,
I know like we've talked about DOM XSS for many times, and I guess in some ways like this could be classed as DOM XSS that we're seeing on the screen because it's going into like a an eval, for example, and that's dynamic execution of JavaScript. Um, if that makes sense. So, um, how would you explain DOM-based cross-site scripting to someone?
ooh. Uh, so
Sorry, I definitely just threw you a curveball there, just totally out of context.
all right. So yeah. So basically, the user input um, uh, ends up in one of JavaScript's dangerous kind of code where the user input is kind of interpreted as JavaScript, and then you can execute code. That's XSS, but DOM XSS is where things happen on the side. I mean, on the client side, the input may go to server side and then come back. Either way, it's still going into one of these JavaScript APIs that messes everything up. So I don't really know how to explain it. I'm sorry.
I think you did a very good job just explaining it then. Yeah, no, it's definitely there. So what about Mutation XSS? I think you probably have a better handle of explaining Mutation XSS than I do.
Ooh, maybe not. We'll see. So Mutation XSS is okay. So a user input is interpreted as or basically it should be harmless, but due to some weird behavior that the browser does, it kind of modifies or mutates your user input into some other form. It kind of transforms it, and then you end up with a malicious code. So it wasn't malicious, but browser knowingly, unknowingly, some weird thing, whatever that might be, it kind of transforms your user non-malicious user input into a malicious user input, if that makes sense.
It does. So I think again, I Security, Michael Bentovsky. I can never pronounce his last name, and I always feel so bad for ever,
Security MB.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've just posted his on the stream as well. So obviously he found some of the DOM Purify mutation XSS bypasses, and I think you explained it, like kind of on top of, very well. So, the way I would interpret it is that you have, normal cross-site scripting, which, is basically one string which gets, evaluated in some way. It could happen through like a dangerous function, etc. But for mutation XSS, you're basically trying to build a string out of many values, which after they've either been sanitized or if that once they've been processed by the the rendering engine in the browser itself, they ultimately end up being passed as a single element, which or maybe many elements which end up being interpreted as JavaScript. So I guess that's the way I would
Sounds
interpret.
better. Yeah.
I mean, I was just, I just looked at like, his blog, so maybe I just, got an inspiration from there. But I found that quite interesting as well, like the DOM Purifier stuff, because, Mario and his team at Cure53 do a fantastic job at, of building DOM Purify. I'm actually going to have him on the stream in a few months to talk about the technical challenges around DOM Purify, which will be very interesting. But I'm just intrigued to see these types of kind of weird and interesting ways of how these vulnerabilities come to pass. Now the final one is DOM clobbering. Can you explain to me DOM clobbering?
Ooh. Okay. So if there's an HTML injection where sort of like you can create HTML elements in the DOM, they end up creating these variables with the same name as the ID or same name as the name attribute of an element. So basically, they kind of create if you create a variable or basically an element, or you basically inject an HTML element like an anchor tag with some ID called hello, then in JavaScript there's going to be a variable called hello that's basically pointing or an HTML anchor element object. So So yeah, you can kind of inject HTML inputs, and on the other hand, that's actually creating JavaScript variables. You're not directly doing it, but the browser is doing it for historical purposes, quote unquote.
Yeah, there was that like 2012 blog post or something in the past that basically talked about like dangerous, HTML elements can be dangerous or something about that. And it was like the ability to obviously in forms
Yeah,
when you have the form ID.
unsafe form names, I
Yeah,
guess.
I think that let's Google it real quick.
Yeah, it's
Unsafe form.
jittering something
Yeah,
website.
unsafe force names for forms control. And like this came
Right.
out in it doesn't even say the date, but Yeah, it's just yeah, it's pretty old. It's been out for quite a while. So this type of issue has been in the web for a very long time. And what I find fascinating about this is that I just posted in the stream the LastPass bug that basically they were using DOM clobbering to basically set elements to be of a type, and also setting attributes of an href to be of the host name. So you had the ability to basically in this case it was just doing a arbitrary trying to execute an exploit.bat on the file, but this was only achievable because of DOM clobbering, which you could find it for like exploiting things in extensions in the browser, and also you ultimately could use this for cross-site scripting too. I believe Mario had found DOM clobbering type issue in, I believe it was the WYSIWYG editor, one of the older WYSIWYG editors that was found. So I think these types of things are super interesting, I guess, to me, in terms of like, so I think there's DOM XSS, which of course is normally just utilizing dangerous APIs. You have Mutation XSS, which is normally either abusing a library or abusing like the rendering engine to basically get to a point where you're able to render something in a malicious way. And then obviously DOM clobbering that allows you to either, I believe, take IDs, and I think there's a name attribute as well to control those particular properties to basically
Some
be able to.
elements have name and some have, for example, I believe iframes create, if you have an ID, then they point to HTML iframe element. But if you do with the name, that points to the window object. Yeah, or
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, I think you're exactly right. So like this type of bug is pretty good for when it's doing like evaluations of like undefined or truthy kind of checks. So like you're checking to make sure that something is there, and obviously the window object is always going to be there in the browser. So you just need to pollute that value, and then of course you can I think in the let's see if we can find it real quick in the DOM clobbering Mario. I don't want to botch his name. Yeah, so he wrote a blog post, sorry, a slide share a long time ago in 2014 around in the DOM, no one will hear you scream. And let's see if we can find it real quick. Yeah, so like, he was able to do things like control the location from an ID and having the href of that value to be like, JavaScript alert 1, for example. And then DOM clobbering and how that works. So yeah, you can have particular values, and I'm pretty sure it's like towards the end here. I'm not going to go through it, but yeah, so that's a very interesting way. Like Mario explained it very well in the past about how DOM clobbering works, which was very, very, very cool. So like now I want to move away from like just show and tell kind of thing. I want to talk about like how do you normally approach finding these types of vulnerabilities. So let's just like put you can choose any from the three we just talked about: DOM XSS, Mutation XSS, or DOM clobbering. How would you generally go and approach finding like these types of bugs in either libraries or just in when you're looking at a bug bounty program or an XSS challenge or a a CTF, for example?
Right. So, how do I approach? All right, maybe. So this is what I usually do. I go about looking for common, the usual 50 something things that we have. I'm not sure where it's listed. I might have it in a text file or something. But yeah, I usually look for them and then see if any user input kind of lands into one of those APIs. Do kind of like a reverse backtracking where does my user input somehow land inside one of these things? If so, boom. If not, and then I continue reviewing the code maybe. And then I look for things like uh, quote unquote potentially hidden things. They may not be like sort of direct things like eval or inner HTML. That could be sort of like um, any array or user supplied array is you're kind of assigning something to a user supplied array, like any index or something like that. In that sense, you can kind of point the array to a to an HTML element, and then index could be inner HTML, and then you can still get XSS in that way. It's kind of hidden, but it's also not. These kind of patterns, you kind of keep looking at them for a while, you're going to get them. So apart from that, I also keep an eye on DOM clobbering quite a bit, because if I see something like element dot whatever, they're using it to assign it to something else or whatever. If it's being used to do something dangerous, then it could be a problem, because it can use the form element to get properties of an object to be clobbered as well, or you can use the infinite iframe DOM clobbering trick. Uh, but the point is, yeah, I look at things, the usual things, and then potentially hidden things. I look for more code. I look for DOM clobbering along the way. Yeah, that's I believe that's all I do.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think the looking for DOM clobbering and stuff is really interesting because there are basically sometimes vulnerabilities hidden in plain sight, and it's because you go through this, you look at the source code, you either review it by just viewing the source or looking at the DOM, and you see these values get assigned to things like inner HTML or to a property or like an anchor tag, for example, and like those types of things aren't an issue to begin with until you then realize, oh wait, this can be clobbered, and you actually can control that value if you have HTML injection, or because sometimes you do have the ability to have bold tags, and you might be able to assign, or like a form, for example, and you might be able to assign the ID, but you can't get script execution right. So there are some definitely interesting cases where you are able to traverse the application to be able to like figure that out. My last question is, how much do you spend looking at just viewing the source, or how much do you look at like actually like interpreting the DOM? So like how much do you spend like between those two elements normally when you're looking for things like obviously DOM XSS and DOM clobbering?
In terms of time.
Yeah, I mean, just like normally, like, are you spending more time like actually viewing the source, or like are you actually like trying to like because like obviously the DOM and the source don't always match up, especially in like single page applications, for example. So like, how do you normally like spend your time between those two?
Not really sure. Um, I haven't really thought about it. Yeah.
It's a hard question to ask. I just think because
Yeah.
like sometimes people might get a bit afraid to kind of like just dig into like one topic area, and I was just wondering like what your
Yeah,
normal.
I can tell you that I start somewhere and then kind of look at it, like only look at it, like like the only thing that I look at it is the thing that I'm looking at it. I'm not overwhelming myself with everything else that's around me. Maybe I take a look at them because they might somehow help me in the thing that I'm currently looking at. So yeah, um, I pick something that's kind of weird, and then or basically, as I review the code, I make notes on what things are kind of could uh, what things, what pieces of code I start somewhere. I see if I could use all of them into creating a bug, or maybe not. And then I keep looking more into it. And then if something that's interesting that pops up, I just, like stare at it and just keep going at it. And then if I need anything else, I just go around, look for more gadgets or, other things, and then come back and then continue. So I focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think I follow a similar approach where, I'll normally start just like looking at the view source and maybe like looking at some of the technology that's involved in the application. And then, once I realize it's more of a dynamic application, I'll start like making notes and like understanding how all the functions start to work. And like I'll kind of move away from just viewing source. So I'll take a look at actually like how the DOM is interpreting things. and then kind of come there. But like normally I start with like a majority of like view source, like taking a look at all of the, I guess all of the embedded JavaScript, like, you know, either like from the library or from the vendors or from, you know, what's client specific, and then trying to build up from that knowledge.
Right.
On that note, I think we're coming to an end. So PwnFunction, thank you so much for joining today. I wanna obviously, you know, put up your Twitter real quick so people can follow you if they do not know who you are today. But I'm sure they probably know you over me. So, so yeah, let's just quickly pop that up. So I would highly recommend you all checking out PwnFunction's Twitter, and that's probably the best way to keep up to date with all of his videos and, you know, what's happening with Hackercamp when it goes into beta, and obviously his rap name as well. So PwnFunction, I really appreciate you being on the stream today. I've had a great time. Hopefully you have too, and I hope everyone who's listening has enjoyed it as well.
It was good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
All right, thank you, PwnFunction.